Hey, what's happening, everybody? Welcome back. Thank you so much for joining me for today's episode as we do return to the LJN tournament once again. And we are on episode 22 of round one. So, recently I have gotten in a couple new additions to the collection. One of them comes from Rush Collectibles. I don't know if I'm going to do a new review of that particular figure. I've done Rush Collectibles reviews before, and I've looked at... So there's 4 figures that come in the set, and I've done the first 3, and I looked at the figures, the 3 figures, and all of their variants, because, you know, all of these companies, they have to have a million different paint schemes with each figure. They just can't come out with different characters, so it's really frustrating. But I finally got the Angel figure. What's his name? The French Angel Maurice Tillet. So, kind of looking at the carded figure, I'm not so superly impressed with the figure. And personally, I'm kind of ticked off with the folks over at Rush Collectibles. I mean, I bought this months and months ago, and like 2 months ago, I reached out to the folks there, and they're like, yeah, man, your order's on the way, it's on the way, and like, it just finally arrived. And I just, last week, actually reached out to them and be like, look, you guys told me my stuff was on the way. It's, and that was like a month and a half, 2 months ago, and I've been patient. Go ahead and cancel my orders. Look, I will reorder the stuff when it's finally in stock. That is what sucks about all these companies and their pre-orders. I hate that. Mattel Creations, when you pre-order something for the Mattel Retros, those figures that you order them pre-order, but they ship out in like a week or so. So I don't really consider them pre-order. I consider it more of a delayed delivery type of deal. So, but I like all these smaller companies, Zombie Sailors, Rush Collectibles, the big rubber guys, Rush Collectibles Ringmasters, the Epic Toys, the Asylum Toys. I mean, it's all these different companies. When you're ordering these figures, you're looking at 8 months to a year, sometimes more, to get your figures in. And a lot of the time, they're coming out with release after release after release, new series after new series, and you know, you're trying to do your diligence and keep up and pre-order all of them, because, you know, again, you're trying to keep your collection complete. But as a collector, it's frustrating because you want to get that stuff in as quickly as possible. And like I said, I have a pretty good idea of what I order or how many I order, but from time to time, yeah, I might lose track, or I might forget, and I might order the same item multiple times, because I might order something from Hastel Toys, and then 3 months later, I'll get an email saying, hey, we got new Diana and British Bulldog figures for sale. And like, oh shoot, cool. And I'll order it again. And like, oh wait, I go back to my email and find out that I ordered it 3 months ago. It's like, so that stuff like that, it's frustrating. So yeah, if I do, I might do a pickup video and just kind of show that off, but I may not do like a full-on review or anything. It shows that it might have like a easy release backing, but I think it's kind of taped down, so I'm not gonna try and uncard that or anything. But these guys, I've gotten a lot of these figures in. They're expensive as hell, and I'm super excited, but I want to wait till I get all of those figures. I call them quick KWK kayfabe figures. The Mantar figure I'm dying for, and I want to get all of the darn versions, all the variants to them. So I may not do that until I have all of them, and I could do a full-on review. But that's kind of something that's to be expected in the near future. Alright, so that's enough chat for the beginning of this video, man. Let's dive into the main focus of this video, which is the LJN tournament. So, alright, first matchup is going to feature Orange Jimmy Hart as he squares off against... That says Vade, but I'm pretty sure that means Vader. John Ruggiero's Vader. I skipped the R. You know what? I think I may have cut off one of the names, because you kind of see a little extra writing at the bottom here. But this is the Paul Orndorff Hogan, and he will square off. No. Damn. Paul Orndorff Hogan squares off against Elf Bobby Heenan. Well, there goes that dream of having those figures go many rounds. Jim Neidhart Red. I know, it's infuriating. Jim Neidhart Red takes on Wrestling Rider Rick Martel. And the last matchup is going to feature... You know what? This is another Jim Neidhart... Yeah, I'll bring it up. Jim Neidhart Stripe. And Jim Neidhart Stripe will take on Kirchner USA. Kirchner USA. Which one is that? I think Kirchner USA was white shirt. Alright, I think a couple of these I have a general idea of where I'm going. That second match is pretty much going to take up my entire video. If this is a 20-minute video or a 50-minute video, that second match is gonna take up the abundance of it, because I have no freaking clue what I'm going to choose. It's a tough one. But I'm going to pause, pull those figures, and we will begin in a split second. Alright, folks. Figures pulled. And let's begin our match, which first begins with Jimmy Hart Orange as he squares off against Vader. And we will look at Jimmy Hart. So, from Harvey Snuts on Macari, I probably picked up, I don't know, a dozen or more figures from him. 15 figures, a large amount. And considering the vast quantity of figures I got from him, and how much I actually really enjoyed so many of the different customs, and custom-wise, 15, let's say 15 figures. Maybe a couple $100, $250, $300. You gotta imagine that the average custom figure on a low end usually hovers around $50 or $60. If you start going to, like, bigger companies like Ram Treasure, let's say, and not just, your general selling from home customizer, you're gonna pay $125, $150 for figures, right? So getting 15 plus figures, 20 figures, however many I got, for around $300, you just knew I was getting fantastic deal after fantastic deal for figures. And being able to bundle them all up together, amazing. So, among the bundle of figures, I got a black jacket, Nasty Boys, Jimmy Hart. And I also got a orange jacket, Nasty Boys, Jimmy Hart. I do like this one more than the black jacket, though. And simply put, because it does come with both Jerry Saggs and Brian Knobbs' face on the jacket. So I thought that was an absolutely brilliant inclusion. In fact, just by the simple inclusion of those little graphics, that potentially makes this my favorite Jimmy Hart figure. Now, the black and blue Hart Foundation Jimmy Hart is very close to being at the very top. Hell, the original white and black original LJN Jimmy Hart can also be very close to being at the very top. So I don't know. I guess all three of those figures would be rated very high. So it's kind of a toss up. Put them in any order you want, one, two, three. Hey, I'm okay with any order. They're all solid pieces. This is. I know Jimmy Hart isn't going to win this tournament. That is fine. 325 or so figures in a tournament, that means 324 are not going to win. Okay, so it's not just about having the one figure that you know is going to win. Otherwise, I would just be like, okay, Ham, here's figure number one, bring up figure number two, choose the best one, bring up figure number three, and kind of keep going from there, and just keep holding the figure that you previously won. If figure number one is the best figure, and you're now on figure 78, and figure number one is still there, that just means figure number one is the best one so far through the first 77 matches. But no, it's the journey about getting from point A to point B. In this case, from round one, from the very first matchup to the very last match up in the finals. One of my favorites. I would like to see this Jimmy Hart figure go 3 rounds at least. I know once we get into round 4, you're talking about best of the best, the most elite figures. It's a fantastic figure, one I really enjoy, but I know a manager figure for the most part, you're probably not going to see many managers or any managers in round 4 or later. So he does go up against John Ruggiero's Vader. Do I have another Vader? I'm thinking. I'm trying to think if I got another LJN Vader in, but no, that was another Kane I got in, not Vader. To me, when I think about characters I absolutely have to have as LJN, Yokozuna, the Rockers, Doink, Vader. I would like to see Mabel. I think Mabel and Yokozuna basically have to have something very similar, and I don't want to see Mabel in a Doink or in a King Kong Bundy body type either. I want to see guys like Yokozuna and Mabel in like their own respective body pose and in body sculpt or whatnot. Diesel. I've seen someone take a Greg Valentine and paint it and call it. I'm like, no, come on now. It's fine if you're just like a run-of-the-mill customizer, but like even me, who pretty much goes out and buys all customs regardless, even I couldn't. I couldn't even go for that. I was so excited to get this Vader in because simply the fact it was Vader. And John Ruggiero, again, he was on my list of top 5 customizers at one point. I don't know if I would necessarily keep him on my top 5, but I've been a big fan of his work. And this was a George Steele figure, and you could tell based on like kind of like the little bumps and stuff that you get off of the George Steele figure. So the pose, obviously, George Steele, he's just like same as King Kong Bundy with the hands out, right? So I love the way that they altered the pose. Gave him a real fighting pose, which made it spectacular. Downside, I don't know what the crab claw was all about. So that right there, if the hand was a realistic hand and not just 3 fingers or whatnot, like I said, crab claw, I think this would be a figure that had the potential to go 3-4, that could probably go 4 rounds. At this rate, I still think that this is a 2nd round figure, maybe even a 3rd rounder, perhaps. But depending on a lot of the figures I've seen thus far pushed in the round 2, I think if this one goes in round 2, I don't think it can necessarily guaranteed a spot in round 3. It's a great figure. I'm ecstatic about getting Invader. Like the pose, I like that the overall color scheme, fantastic. I think if they were able to incorporate the Mastodon helmet type of deal on there, freaking brilliant. From Stephen Watson, UK base seller in that does a lot of the Hasbro LJ or does a lot of Hasbro and Mattel retro customs. One of the Vader customs I bought from him. This was pre Mattel Retros releasing their own Vader. I also had the little Vader mask on him, helmet and everything. Perfect. Absolute immaculate accessory. Kind of looking at this, I mean, this is actually drawn on, and that is a downside. I think it would have been better if it was actual cloth or like an actual face mask, but it does give you like that bone crunching action type of look. Very, I don't want to say shoddy because you remember how BCA, how they have that drawn on look, and the Jack Pacific figure looks very weird. I will give John credit. He does make this look a whole lot more realistic, a lot better, but it kind of falls under the whole BCA type of deal. So in that respect, I kind of give him props for it. It doesn't matter which way you're going. I do think that Vader, for me, hands down, is the better figure. Better figure, and just simply one I enjoy a lot more. Among John's figures, I think the Mountie is probably one of my favorites, but he has an awesome cane. I really like the Vader, and his Steiner Brothers figure are on par. He has a lot of amazing figures. So, there's a reason I got so many customs from him, right? So, next matchup. I'm moving along. This sucks. I'm probably going to spend 10 years talking about this, but I'm going to try my best to keep it to around 5 to 10 minutes. The Paul Orndorff, as I classify Paul Orndorff Hogan version, squaring off against the Heenan Elf. And we'll start with the Heenan Elf this time. So, the Bobby Heenan Elf does have the distinction of actually being a previous tournament winner. Not a My Favorite LJN tournament winner, but he did win the My Favorite Manager tournament. So, every manager, every commentator, every analyst or executive, referee, they all fell under the umbrella of manager. And between all my customs and original figures, I kind of had a feeling, I kind of thought either referee was probably going to win the tournament. If not, maybe Freddie Blassie. Bobby Heenan would probably have been like my third choice. But the Elf, man, the Elf. I just didn't think that the Elf would have meant as much to me as it does. But it's an incredible freaking piece. And I've gotten a lot of horror-related figures in for my Halloween batch, and getting a lot of Christmas-based figures as well. So when, holidays come around, you kind of do a little short video kind of showing off the collection. Be like, hey, here's some nice figures to enjoy. Probably put together a 2 or 3 minute video just to let people kind of see the different figures, whatnot. And this is so well done. I'm trying to think, was this a Harvey Snuts figure as well? It might be, but I can't say for sure. I can't remember. So I thought one of the things that I would have probably liked better if it was all red, but then I kind of felt like that would have made him Santa Claus. At least by putting the green on there, you kind of say it's an elf and not Santa Claus. But then maybe the pants should have been green as well. So maybe that would have made it more legitimate as elfish. But I love dual colors as well, so I think it also makes it pop. So I'm kind of torn. But I kind of staying the way it is. I really wouldn't change anything. Now, if someone decided to come out with another figure like this and wanted to make it all green or something, yeah, I'd probably buy that up too. That way I have a nice little couple figures back to back to show off. But I mean, the built on Santa hat, all right, absolutely fantastic. The glitter on both pants and jacket, incredible. Way that the pants and the lower jacket and the cuffs, the way that they puff, perfect. There is a reason this one won the manager tournament. It's a spectacular figure. And Bobby Heenan, as you already know, the original Bobby Heenan figure is already an incredible piece. Even as a manager, he still makes a fantastic playable wrestling action figure. You're not gonna sit there and ruin or attempt to ruin this by wrestling this figure. At least I would imagine if anybody had this, that they wouldn't try to do that. This really is a perfect display piece. This is tough. This is tough because the Paul Orndorff, I can't stand the Paul Orndorff from LJN. I mean, it's not a horrific figure. I mean, just the kind of like the pose, it's adequate. I mean, is it serviceable? Sure. But really playable? Not really. Putting Paul Orndorff in a Hulk Hogan pose, all right. I've said if every single LJN figure had the Hogan pose, every single figure would be lights out perfect. But you give him an amazing color scheme. Mr. Wonderful, I don't know if you could read that on the back. Good detail and color around the boots. All right. So when you look at this figure, I mean, there are obvious discrepancies. Like when I don't know if you can really make it out on screen, but right here, you can see the outline. Right here's the bottom, and it kind of goes around the shoulder area and onto the back, where this part, everything that I'm pointing out right here and above it is a lot darker than the actual flesh tone. So you can see that obviously they removed the head and popped up Paul Orndorff head on there, right? So it doesn't bleed in as beautifully. You don't look at the figure and be like, oh man, I can't tell that this was never not original. No, you can tell. But I mean, you're looking at it from a distance. If I'm like arm fully extended, I probably couldn't notice that. It's just a overall good looking quality figure. I like this. I like the color scheme, and I feel like if I push this forward, it would be pushed forward based on fighting pose. They're action figures. All playable toys, playable action figures, or all toys should be playable and usable. It's their first and primary purpose. The look and aesthetics is incredible, but you gotta go with serviceability first and foremost, above all else. Paul Orndorff is an absolutely amazing addition to the collection, and I was so enthusiastic getting this figure in. I am gonna go with Bobby Heenan, guys. I just cannot put the Heenan elf down. Now, eventually, maybe. I mean, if Heenan comes up against Zeus, if Heenan goes up against the resin Ricky Steamboat, if Heenan goes up against the Colonel Mustafa, if Heenan goes up against Berserker, if Heenan goes up against my two-time incompetent champion Bruiser Brody, is that going to give him? I mean, if he defeats any of those guys, I mean, the sky's the limit. Then at that chance, there's a good opportunity he could win the tournament. Then, yes, I've said it before. there are certain figures you look at and you say, you know what, they could go very far, but meaning they could defeat a ton of people, but not necessarily win the tournament. This particular figure, original Bobby Heenan probably couldn't win the tournament. He could go far, but couldn't necessarily win the tournament. But this particular figure absolutely could win this tournament. Do I covet it more than, let's say, a Bruiser Brody, a two-time champion? The only thing that this one doesn't have that the Bruiser Brody figure does have is accessory. Fantastic look. Name recognition. Someone I actually watched growing up. I mean, I might have despised Bobby Heenan, but I mean, he was a freaking fantastic commentator. So I loved having him on the mic. I didn't watch Bruiser Brody growing up. I didn't know anything about him until I became a collector. So I know obviously more about Heenan than Brody. So name recognition definitely helps him there. The look and display of the figure is fantastic. Play pose is great. So yeah, accessory is really the only thing that he would be missing. So I would say that Bobby Heenan is comparable to Bruiser Brody. If that helps. Does that mean that Bruiser Brody loses if that matchup ever happens? Not necessarily, but it wouldn't be an easy matchup. Let's just put it that way. I would really have to sit there and really focus and really like ponder which one I really like. Next matchup. God damn. Every time I talk, I blow these freaking stickers or these papers around. So from Wrestling Writer, we had Rick Martel, and he squared off against Red Jim Neidhart. So this is more of an AWA Rick Martel, and we classify him as model Rick Martel technically. You can see pictures of Rick Martel in blue and all that, right? But obviously when I think model Rick Martel, I think pink. I think WWF, I think early 90s, I think pink Rick Martel. I think Hasbro Rick Martel, obviously. So kind of seeing him in a whole blue getup, you know, that's kind of foreign to me. But Rick Martel, one of your biggest superstars of AWA, one of your best champions, probably. I didn't really know about Strikeforce in the 80s. Obviously, still a baby when that team was formed, so I mean, I wasn't watching wrestling as a 2-year-old or 3-year-old. Yeah, I mean, all of my memories for a lot of these wrestlers were 90s based. So when I talk about guys like Kamala, you know, when I think Kamala, I think the first time Kamala ever wrestled, and I'm not even talking about first time he ever wrestled WWF. I'm talking about like the first time he ever wrestled, period. In my kid brain, first time he ever showed up, period, in wrestling was in the 1990s when he first appeared in WWF, probably around, what was it, 1990, 91? 91, 92? I used to have those dates right, but now I can't keep them straight, but because he was there for a year, then he disappeared and came back for like another 6-month tour or something and then left again. But freaking Kamala's been wrestling seems like forever, man. Spent years in WWF, obviously in the 80s, but he was active in the 70s and probably 60s, but at least we know he was wrestling in the 70s. So I read that on the back of his bio card from Legends of Professional Wrestling. I'm like, dang. Like, I would have no clue that he was active that long. Bushwhackers have been wrestling since like 1964. I'm like, that's freaking insane. Those guys had a 40-year career. How do you spend 40 years wrestling? Model Rick Martel, or Rick Martel in general, again, as I've always said, top 20 action figure. One of the best from the original LJN line. Similar to Tito Santana, yes, but his arms are much higher and they're at a point where they're actually playable. They're higher and they're up. Where Tito Santana, his arms obviously further down, his hand and his palms are up. So it's just stupid. Just a terrible play, just a terrible design for Tito Santana, but a fantastic play pose for Rick Martel. Worst thing about him, same thing with Hacksaw Jim Duggan and Vince McMahon and Jim Brunzell and, well, I mean, to an extent, because he has open fingers, maybe, but does the referee have an open finger? Did I say Big Boss Man already? Guys like that. I don't like the pointer fingers or thumbs and whatnot. And in fact, I think Rick Martel's actually missing point of his pointer finger. Yeah, he's missing the tip here. But that is your model Rick Martel and Jim Neidhart. We're going to see a couple Jim Neidharts in this video. Why? Because it seems like every time I choose a figure, I always happen to pick multiple customs of that exact same figure in the same video. So weird how that freaking keeps playing out, and it's frustrating. So if you guys look at the actual LJN posters, and when you pull out Bret Hart individual poster or the Jim Neidhart individual poster, this is what they're wearing. They're not wearing pink pants or darker purple or darker pink, light purple pants. They're wearing red pants. So I love the fact that they kind of customized these figures. I got a Bret Hart and a Jim Neidhart where they're kind of in their poster getup. So I think that's pretty awesome. I'm gonna make this a pretty quick match. Jim Neidhart, to me, is a top 10 figure. Rick Martel is a top 20. In that regard, yes, Jim Neidhart is a better figure. One I think is a little bit more enjoyable. Maybe. Actually, nowadays, hell, I might even put Rick Martel above Jim Neidhart. I don't know. I don't care. I mean, they're both good figures. There's a lot of Jim Neidhart figures in this tournament, and I think I like them all better than this one, even though I'm kind of looking this over, and I might have to second guess myself. A lot of these figures, I buy them, I look them over, I'm like, okay, they look nice, put them on stands, display them, and I'm done with them. But sitting down, actually doing these tournaments, like, I don't know if I even noticed the shoelaces. Like, you would think that would really pop. That would be so noticeable. But some of the smallest details, it really stands out. I don't know. Alright, I'm going to lean towards... Nah. I'm going to choose Rick Martel for this one, guys. At the end of the day, I do think some of the other Rick Martel or some of the other Jim Neidhart figures I'd probably choose. So let's have another Rick Martel figure in the tournament. Last matchup from Wrestling Writer is yet another Jim Neidhart, as he squares off against Corporal Kirchner. And I've been classifying this one as simply Corporal Kirchner USA. So I do believe that this one did come from Harvey Snuts on Mercari, Hulk $0125. So right off the bat, let's just get to some of the highlights. You changed the green beret, kind of given this golden brown, or actually it's more of like a bronze type of beret, which I think that's really smooth. And they did give him a really nice facial hair, so I thought that's pretty cool. Not the pure jet black that you get from what normal customizers put on there, or what you get from the original LJN. It's more of a darker brown, and it kind of meshes in with his hair. So I think that's pretty cool. And his hair is like brown, where again, his LJN figure is actually black hair. So they didn't just upgrade the beret, but they actually changed the color of the actual hair as well. I think that's a nice little upgrade as well. The change in the pattern of the woodland camouflage of the BDU pants are absolutely spectacular. Then they throw in some jungle boots. Alright, so yeah, this one, I don't know, I was thinking this was probably one of the weakest Corporal Kirchner figures I own, but now looking it over, I disagree. I think this is actually one of the stronger ones. I mean, the paint overall is holding up everywhere I see. It's looking solid. It all boils down to, though, like, where do I put Corporal Kirchner? If I say Jim Neidhart is, again, I haven't done a my favorite or a top 10 list in 2.5 years. I did a top 10 list right after the first My Favorite LJN tournament. And I chose my winner, and then I came back afterwards and I started putting figures in order that I thought I liked the best. But I say that I might create a list right now and then come back 5 minutes later, make that exact same list, and make it completely different. Because your opinions are always changing, right? So, and one of the things that you notice is like Hulk Hogan, I had listed him as my number 2 favorite LJN figure, but Hulk Hogan was always like a very early elimination in my tournaments. At least the custom eliminated the original, and then that one was usually gone round 3, limited by stud, right? So this tournament, I kind of feel like those Hogan figures have a much better opportunity, could advance a whole lot further. And if they go up against stud again, things could change. Seeing them go against stud in the earlier round compared to seeing them go against, say, stud or Kamala, Bruiser Brody in a late round or semifinals, finals match, that's a different story. That's a whole different story. That's a whole different ballgame right there. So if I were to redo that list again, I don't know. I'd probably put this in the top 10 maybe, but maybe not. Maybe he falls out of it. I don't know if I have Corporal Kirchner in my top 20. He's probably a top 25, top 30 figure. Still one of my favorites. He's got the small arm. The way that his arm's back, it's Greg Valentine-esque. It's low and it's short, so it's not as like the best body slam pose like you get from Greg Valentine. Greg Valentine has that awesome left arm under body slam pose, but this one doesn't really give you the most pristine body slam pose, but it's sufficient, and it's, again, one of the more enjoyable action figures. There's a whole lot more going on with the Corporal Kirchner, and at first glance, I honestly thought I was going to choose Eric's version of Jim Neidhart, but picking this figure up, talking about it, looking it over, again, opinions change all the time, and I am going to go with Corporal Kirchner. I just think, like I said, there's just a lot going on with this figure. Sometimes when there's a lot going on, it's too much, and it just takes away from the figure, and it makes it worse off. Sometimes too much makes it even better. So Corporal Kirchner is going to defeat Jim Neidhart. So seeing two Jim Neidhart figures lose back to back, I mean, that's kind of shocking. But there are an absolute ton of Jim Neidhart figures in this tournament, so I'm not going to shed a tear over a couple random figures, a couple random customs. And I'm wondering if I think his original figure from the original LJN line was already eliminated as well. So if a Jim Neidhart figure is going to advance very far in this tournament, he's going to have to make it via one of his customs. So, but that is it for this video, guys. As always, thank you so much for watching. Hopefully this was yet another very enjoyable video for you guys. And until next time, goodbye, everybody.